And pardon me a second.
You need to not be up there, buddy. Thank you.
I'm glad you're able to edit, because that was just gonna get worse.
Welcome to People Watching, a podcast where we figure out what it looks like to become the role model we've always wanted by talking with real people who have found real role models in their own lives. I'm Megan Robinson. Every week, I sit down with a guest, and together we cut through all the noise and identify better sources of hope, creativity, and wisdom as we learn to make decisions about the kind of life we want to live. So join us. Let's do some people watching. My guest today is Charon Henning, illustrator, fine artist, and dear friend. I first met Charon about 20 years ago on what turned out to be our first day at George Mason University as adult learners. Charon has been a performer, a tattoo artist, a bartender, and now she has a working illustration studio in rural Vermont, where she lives with her wife and 2 cats, who do make appearances during our conversation. Charon graduated from George Mason University with a degree in multimedia storytelling, and she's currently the art director for Professor Katie Hinn's March Mammal Madness tournament. She also works as a freelance scientific illustrator and visual science communicator, and she's fabulous at that. She's also building 18 Hertz Arts Collective, a nonprofit that fosters creative exploration and liminal and legendary spaces. Charon and I wandered freely in our conversation, from discussing our religious and spiritual journeys to the deep well of myth, ritual, and identity that shapes creative work. We also talked about the intersection of science and art, and about how paying attention with all our senses helps us train our intuition, creativity, and our work in the world. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome, Charon. We're in the studio.
Well, in the studio. Wow. I'm loving that my studio looks different than yours and has way too many cats in it right now.
Cats are good. Cats are welcome on this podcast.
Good, because they will be making themselves known, believe me. And I have very little to say about it. So,
yeah. Awesome. As we get started on this conversation, I love asking my guests to join with me in reading our touchstones. And touchstones are expectations for the conversation, pop-up guides or pop-up rules for ourselves and for our listeners. So, Charon, would you start us off reading with the first one?
Okay. Whatever we share is by invitation, not obligation. If either of us is not comfortable pursuing a topic, let's just say, I prefer not to share. Thank you.
Awesome. And silence is also a partner in our conversation. Feel free to take a moment to reflect without immediately filling the space with words, and leave room for the inner teacher to whisper as well.
Be present as fully as possible. This is a space to acknowledge our doubts, fears, and failings as much as it is a space to share our joys, convictions, and successes.
Here. And also, let's ask open, honest questions. If we're not sure what the other meant in the question or statement, ask. It gives us a chance to clarify or rephrase. And ask questions that we genuinely don't know the answer to. Surprise can be a great catalyst of insight.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Charon, I know you and I have known each other since we were wee tots, or certainly young,
For
fresh-faced.
185 years, we have been friends for 185. At least, I did the math, actually, before I signed on, and I think it's been close to 20 years, if not a little more. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't seem like that.
Now, don't think about things. And I'm like, wait, that was 20? Oh,
Yeah,
it's just when you start being able to think in decades and you're still like an adult, when the decade happened, you're just like, oh, that's weird. We pick up a lot of things about each other in 20 years, almost 20 years. But I'm actually super excited for this conversation because I feel like there's still things that I'm going to learn about who you are and how you're moving through the world. And I would just really love to hear, what's your life journey to this point? What are the things that stand out to you as meaningful, as where you really feel like this helps shape who I am and how I've gotten to this moment in time?
I think the most important thing that I would cite is the fact that my brother and I, who are both in creative careers, we did not grow up hearing art's not going to pay the electric bill. You can do this in your spare time, but you'd really need to find something that's going to be a long-term surefire method for career success. We just never heard that. Now, my mother she was a worrier. I inherited that honestly from her, bless her. She definitely encouraged us to approach it sensibly. And while our father did the same, it was more along the lines of, if you are going to do this, the best path to take is the path that it's going to be the harder path because you're forging your own career identity and you're not relying on somebody else for your paycheck. It's coming from you. So you'll have to work probably twice, maybe 3 times as hard to have the life that you would like for yourself from this. But that's also the way that you grow and the way that it's going to be the most gratifying and rewarding for everybody in the end. So that's, I would say, the first thing. And both of us, if we expressed interest in something, there would be help given, lessons, introductions to people who were experts in that field. And they would see if it took, that's great. And if it didn't, maybe we don't go back for that 4th or 5th lesson. And if it did take, it's okay, where do we go from here? Who do we know that can help our child grow in this way? What opportunities should we support with resources? Because you have to make choices with that. We, as adults, we understand that now. And making choices as to what you think is going to benefit your child the most when you're talking about benefiting your child's future career in the arts, that's a hard place to stand in, let alone make decisions from, especially when others around you are concerned about that art thing that your kid is doing. So just having encouragement and being given access to those resources, I wish I had a better understanding of why going to the library was considered so important, because I was not a great reader back in the day. I found it fiddly, I found it time-consuming, and when it was presented to me, it was presented as busy work in school. I was one of those kids who, like many kids, I think, wriggled out of the reading assignment as much as I possibly could, because nobody told me, even through high school, that the purpose of all those research papers was not just to regurgitate information. It was to teach us that if you wanted to know more about something or find out more information, these are the steps you take. You go to the library, you ask somebody where to find this information, they show you, and then you figure out what resources have the answers that you're looking for. But that's not how it's presented in education, really. This is what you do. This is how it's done. I think most kids growing up in the public education system, I was trained to be a good portion of the labor force. You're turned out into the world with all the skills you need to be a good worker, all right, for somebody else. But when you come out of that situation and you already know that you're not going to be doing that, it can sometimes feel like you're jumping into outer space. I had a graphic design job right out of high school, which was a disaster because of a much older man as my boss who got very inappropriately creepy. And it was really gross. And it wasn't, again, graphic design is one of those things that you if you want to do art sensibly, here's a way to do it. And I still don't consider myself a designer. And I have many people in my life who say, oh, you're a brilliant designer. I'm an illustrator. That's what I do. I know other people who do design. They're really good at it. So those are very different things. And they're in demand in very different areas. So tried that. Didn't really grok. Got the chance to revisit some of what I was doing there later on because what I had been hired for initially was to help do color separations for comic books that were being reissued by Marvel Comics.
Oh, wow.
So this was the first time that I had ever seen what comic book art looked like before it went to print because they sent us the original art on the big 11 by 17s. And you see every correction, you see every pivot, you see every choice that the inkers and pencilers and writers made and how those choices evolved over time. And that page is heavy because it's got so many layers of pivots and different decisions on it. So I was like, this is interesting. This is not just people sitting down and being talented enough to just use one shot, we're good, we're on to the next page. It's messy. It's messy. Like the stuff that I do and continue to do is messy. So that was really cool. Learning tools like Scanner, like the Adobe Creative Suite, that stood me in good stead, but it still really wasn't the kind of thing that I wanted to be doing. What I wanted to be doing was drawing animals and sharing how awesome the natural world was. I was always glued to the BBC nature specials. David Attenborough was, every time he had something new out, it was a family thing that we would watch it. And frankly, it still is. And just having that love of what's out there and really not understanding why other people didn't think it was as I thought it was. And that's the overarching theme that's landed me here. When you and I met in college, I was doing performance, which another form of storytelling. But the kind of performance that I was doing allowed me to travel. I would immediately look to see if there were zoos, aquariums, any kind of an animal park or nature center where I could go and talk to people and see different species and learn about the ecosystem there. And the degree that I built in the program that you and I went through together was a performance-based degree that I termed multimedia storytelling, because that was the only academic way I could say circus sideshow at the time. And what has ended up happening is that has evolved into science communication, visual psychom, and outreach using art to teach science, and with a focus on the natural history sciences. So all the people who asked, storytelling degree, what are you going to use that for? This is what I'm using it for. This is what I'm using it for. I'm looking around seeing if I could. Oh, you know what? I do have a piece I can show. This is what I'm using it for.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I know.
That's
Every
when
time I see your art, every time I see your work, I am just blown away by the level of detail that you bring to it and the level of liveliness that you bring to it. Even the drawings that you've done of your fossils and everything, there's just still something very warm about them. And I just think that truly does come from your lifelong love of this. Like love what's there.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Every dinosaur book that was out there was part of my upbringing. And I found out much later that had my mother been able to work her will, she would have been a paleobiologist. But young women were not encouraged to go into fields at that time.
Yeah.
So when I expressed an interest in dinosaurs and megafauna, he was like, right on, we're doing this. And like every book that I was interested in would come into the house because she got to read it too.
Mhm. Yeah.
When I was in a museum and doing work on fossil horses, because Eohippus was the place that it started for her, she was fascinated by the idea of a horse the size of a small dog with many toes that had become this large animal with one toe and the progression there. And that was the progression I was working on for the Raymond M. Alf Museum of Paleontology in California. Being able to tell her one holiday season that I was working on the transitional fossils that were 2 generations beyond Eohippus
Yeah.
was a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's multimedia storytelling, right?
Yeah.
So I'm using the degree, just not in the way that I thought that I was
Sure.
getting a degree to use it for. Yeah, it's you go around the side and you go in the side door and you realize, oh, this is an easier way to get here. And it's more of what I'm good at and the resources that I already have. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's been a little cool.
How did you come? Because you have been working, you've been doing your own thing for quite a while before you started going, like, before you started your degree at Mason. Did you start at community college and then transfer to Mason? I can't remember. Were you taking classes at Mason?
No, I had done my associate's degree in fine art at Community College in Maryland. I was really blessed with great teachers. Frank Cho, very famous comic book artist, was same year as I was in that class.
Okay.
And you can see we have achieved the degree of fame, which we have worked. Well, but this was a path that a lot of people were on. It wasn't just me. I thought I wanted to do comics for a while, and I was able to work in comics for a while. I worked on independent comics for quite some time. And again, just a lot of these things, it just wasn't quite, the fit wasn't quite right. It was teaching me things that would become useful, but whoever knows that at the time, right? So after I graduated with that degree, 93,
Okay.
and took a break because I literally didn't know what I quite wanted to do. And it took a near-death experience to make me sit back and go, okay, if the time is limited, what do I want to spend it doing? And what's going to be the best use of that? Because it's the whole Fight Club thing. Until you realize you're going to die, you take all of this for granted.
Sure.
And that got me into the admissions offices at Mason, and I was lucky enough to meet a very astute student who was at the admissions desk who asked, how long have you been out of high school? And when I told them, they said, oh, there's this program that you have to be, it's a minimum of 8 years, and you definitely have that. You might be interested in taking a look at this. And it was the individualized studies program.
Okay.
And I came to that very much, I would imagine, in the same way you did, because nothing else really fit. It was like a little bit here, a little bit there. And again, learning things in all of these spots, but it just wasn't quite
Mhm.
wasn't quite it.
Yeah.
So having the opportunity to build a degree from multiple disciplines, that was a gift. And that was pretty
No.
life changing.
I still, one of the things I personally have realized over the last few years, because I was on for years from being like early teens, I was on this, I'm an academic and I'm going for my PhD and I would be a career academic. And one of the things that kind of like broke that open for me, among many things, was the realization, darling, you're very interdisciplinary. And the higher up the more degrees you get, the more they want you to specialize. And you really hate specializing.
Yep. Yep.
And I think that's really for the same reasons you like the individualized studies. That's what I loved about the program. It's like, oh, you mean I could take a class on ancient Egyptian religion and magic and it counts for my degree? Okay.
Well, I got 6 credits writing a field journal my first tour of the winter season Ren Fair circuit in the Southeast. I got called credit for that. It was awesome. It was really awesome. But I poured my heart and soul into that field journal because I knew that at some point some student was going to pick it up and read it. And I wanted to be as honest and just frank and as brutal as possible about what was happening with me, with my head, with my heart. Because it's a hard life being out there traveling on the show circuit. It's a really hard life. It's worth it when it works. And when you're in the thick of it and things are not so great, you just want to be anywhere but there. And then you look back on it when you're not there anymore and you realize that it was probably one of the most fun times you've had in your life. This result sounded really good.
Yeah. And how long were you on the show circuit? And were you always doing the sword swallowing when you were?
No, it was wrangling cats. My brother's a professional magician. He got one of the last theater degrees that was issued by Western Maryland College.
Okay.
And that was where he met his future partner. And so he's in a very real way using that degree now as well.
Yeah.
So my brother's a professional performer with that theater degree that he was issued. He wasn't always. He came out of college and went into finance and spent some time on the stock exchange and as a broker.
Okay.
But again, you learn stuff there, but you realize the whole time that it's not quite where you need to be.
Yeah.
But he still uses lessons from that in the performance work that he does.
Sure.
So and we're 11 years apart. He's 11 years older. So I was hanging out with a lot of performers, a lot of magicians. And when I started meeting people who were doing circus side, it's like and being a magician takes genuine skill. It is a lot of hard work. It is a very different way of thinking and understanding how people normally think and then working around that. But there was something about the sideshow that was just more gritty and real. And my angsty late teen self was like, that's the place for me. And that's how I met my partner. And we've been together also for, 21 years. Because I think I met both of you around the same time.
I think when I met you guys, it was still fairly new.
I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I'd love to know if there's anything that resonated for you, or maybe brought up questions. If you have feedback, a comment, or maybe you have a suggestion for someone you think I should talk to, I would love to know. I will leave a link in the description box below, so you can just fill out that quick form, shoot me a message, and I promise I'll check it. So thanks so much for being here, and now let's get back to the conversation.
I'm just very curious because I know something of where you have come to, but not necessarily exactly how you got there. And I'm so curious to hear about your faith journey and just what that's looked like for you and what that's meant for you as it's intersected with these other
Mhm.
events and meanings that you've shared.
It's still evolving,
Sure,
and I think it always will be,
sure.
because if
It would be
you
dead if it wasn't. So
what's that?
it would be a dead for faith if it wasn't. So
And a yeah, I think if you decide, okay, I've reached that pinnacle, it's like, what again are you doing? Really? Because I don't care what faith you come from, that you immerse in, that you profess, you're never done. You're just never done. There's always going to be more. I was raised Episcopal,
Good.
and yeah, BB, woo, Catholic light. And we had a couple of really good Sunday school teachers who encouraged us to do things like ask questions. And we weren't just, I know, right? We weren't just told this is how it is. When we challenged them, we had adults talking with us intelligently and challenging us in turn with, well, you believe this. What makes this so hard? And getting us from here to here. And sometimes they didn't. There's still times, and especially in science, where you can get here and you think it's related to here, but there's no clear path to get there. I had one of our teachers once said that he felt that the job of science was to answer how, and the job of religion and faith was to answer why. And when he tried to do the opposite with those things, that's where he started running into trouble. And I think that's very astute.
yeah,
I really do.
yeah.
So we had a lot of good teachers who were encouraging us to ask questions, and the Episcopals allowed young ladies to be altar attendants as well. So I learned that at an early age. I had two different style of instructor, very different. The first was a gentleman who, when asked, why do we do it this way? That's the way it's done.
Oh, that's the worst.
It's just like, okay, why? Because that's the way it's been done. It's been decided that this is the way it's done. My other instructor, who also happened to be my father, said, this is what we're representing. You light the candles in this way because we are representing us coming together as a community. And other times in the season, you light them from the cross out because the light is coming from the cross. I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me. That is perfectly reasonable. And it's something I remember. And I know which part of the season to do this particular thing in. And he was really the first to explain to me the purpose of ritual and why things were done in that way, because it evoked a certain emotion, response, connection. And that's what we're trying to do, gathering in this little building, is to establish connection, not only with the divine, but with each other too. So I got the importance of community from my church experience as well. All this time, I'm fascinated by myths, legends, Greek mythology. My father's reading a lot of Asimov, a lot of Piers Anthony. I'm looking at all these book covers going, wow, that's cool. And wanting to find out what I'm looking at. And I immediately started making connections across the faiths to all of these characterizations and stories that were being told. You read Watership Down, Richard Adams also understands this and wrote every bit of the stories of El Ra based on this particular kind of structure. And you can find those stories out in every major faith. And we find them in all of those places because they're important. They're important to what makes us human and what makes us humans who are searching for that greater thing outside of ourselves. So yeah, it's going to appear everywhere because that's what we're doing. And even if you're an atheist, and you're going to concerts, seeing bands you like, you're seeking something greater outside of yourself. Is it religion? No, I wouldn't necessarily say it is.
Sure.
But it is part of what makes us human, is to seek out those experiences because they transform us in some way.
Those
That is
ecstatic,
rarable.
ecstatic.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, rock concert's a great example of that experience,
Yeah.
especially when you get a really charismatic front person who is doing call and response with you and can get that audience working together. Now you're a community. Now you're part of something bigger
Mm.
and outside of yourself, but you're part of it. I think that's a pretty major part of faith as well. And of course, being very nature-minded and interested in natural history, I decided for a time that I must be Wiccan because this is what these people do. What ended up happening was I got connected with a couple of folks who were bringing forward the traditions of Alexander's, who had taken Wicca, as Gerald Gardner had set it down, and combined it with Kabbalah. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because in Christian faith, when the Jews fled into the countryside with the Christians, that's where the Christians got the Kabbalah, is from that big exchange of knowledge. We even have, I don't remember which versions of the New Testament writing contains it, but you will find references to Jesus being taught Kabbalah by scholars. This is a thing that happened, and it's continuing to happen across time with these cross-pollinizations of traditions. And that always really fascinated me. And with all the talk of things like appropriation now, I think it's important to remember that if this is a tradition that is freely given to another group by the group that has been practicing it, especially if it's a situation of making sure that tradition doesn't die, and this other culture brings it forward, I think appropriation has not even entered the conversation at that point. It has been passed on.
Yeah.
Now, if you're looking at another culture's tradition and going, oh, wow, that looks really cool or pretty, I think I'm going to do that too. Now we're starting to get into some stuff that's problematic.
Sure.
Because you don't know the significance of all of that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can back up because there was something else that I was going to talk about in there. Being freely given to another culture, especially if it's in danger. Yeah, a friend of mine, white woman, studied at the feet of an elder of the Odawa. And her grandkids were like, what are you doing teaching this white woman? And she's, none of you pay me any mind or spend any time learning this stuff. I got to teach it to somebody.
Yeah. Wow.
Because you guys don't care. So there's some of that too, with generational disconnect. And it's, if you're not going to bring it forward, you can't tell your elders they're not allowed to find other routes for that, because that's not your decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Because I only asked her, I was like, how does this happen? How do you get into a situation where you were literally studying you're getting a first person education from somebody who is ostensibly can be perceived, you're perceiving each other at some point in history as the enemy. And now you're exchanging information. And yeah, and when your own people feel like they've outgrown or they don't have use for those traditions, you really don't get to dictate where those traditions go if you're not willing to pick it up.
Oh, yeah.
You really don't.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking about, so you grew up in the Episcopal Church, and I just think it's so interesting. Like, I love listening to this because I grew up in the lowest of low church traditions where ritual was literally of the devil and you didn't do any of it. Never mind, every single Sunday we followed the same routine, which like, what is that if not?
Surprise.
Yeah, it was also it was ritual. It was like that calf-like thing. It's very papish. What are you doing with it? What? Anyway, so I love hearing about that, and I feel like in some ways, like I'm playing catch up, trying to as I'm learning about different religious traditions. But I think, and then you talked about investigating Wicca, which is also very much based on ritual. There's a lot of ritual involved, but is that part of what it felt familiar or attractive, or it's just felt natural? I'm just curious, like how this has gone on, because I remember one time you had come through town. I came up to your hotel room and you said something about like your little altar or something, like you have a small altar. And I was like, that's interesting. I've never heard of that practice before. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that aspect of the journey.
Yeah, we have, you can't see it because it's behind the screen, but we have a house altar that
Okay.
will tell various objects that will rotate in and out during the season. Some are precious things that we have collected along the way. Some are gifts from friends. Some are things that we just saw and acquired because they evoked that response that we want to have. Very piecemeal in that it was a fairly almost dead tradition that was pieced back together by Gerald Gardner. And the jury is still out on what it is, where it came from. But there's no question that there are many devotees. There's many different denominations. I was always interested in looking at the stuff that intersected with the things that most people in so-called pagan traditions were trying to get away from. So I was looking at some of the books that had ritual work in them that were related to the hierarchies of angels. I was looking at all of that. I was looking at tables of correspondences. I think the correspondences is really the thing that has stayed most with me, because backing up a little bit, I had told you I started noticing these similarities across practices, across faiths. Then you find out there's a correspondence in pretty much every faith for each finger, for each of the cardinal directions, for realms above, realms below, and each of those are associated with things that are around us every day. This is where you get some of the names and the symbols in alchemy that are still used in lab settings because they mean the same thing. They still mean the thing that they were assigned to mean.
And you alchemists were the original scientists.
Yes, they were. Absolutely, they were.
Yeah.
Science comes from the occult. And people still don't trust it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess it makes sense that I would come through all of that and find myself here in it working with academics in the sciences as an artist who is looking at these things through a very different lens and a much less academic lens. It's certainly a different kind of education when I'm working with paleontologists or anthropologists. Although I will tell you, when you start talking with them outside of work, you'll have these really interesting conversations where they'll talk about, oh, yeah, there's so many people who, if they can't identify what this thing is, they'll say it's a ritual object. And this is a big joke in the paleontological community, right? Just say it's a ritual object. It'll take on a life of its own. And it does, for the most part. But they will talk about how they approach things very practically. And some of them have needed to spend time within tribal peoples who have, they go through all of the proper sequence of events, offerings, meetings, introductions to get permission to step onto the land and just look around to see where the remains of the animals that they are studying might be found.
Yeah.
So they tell you all of this. And then they will tell you the most fantastical story about a dream that they had. And one of the tribal gods appears and points at a spot on the land. And they get up and they go to that spot the next day and start to dig. And there, 18 inches down, is what they're looking for. Everybody has one of these stories. And it's you ask people, do you believe in ghosts? No. But there's this one time, and this happens in sciences too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's there are things out there that we
I know you and I have talked
we
about
not
this.
know.
9 times out of 10, we don't believe it, but there's that 10th time.
Exactly, the 10th time. Exactly.
It kind of disproves the whole rest of them.
Yeah, and if you talk with physicists and quantum physicists who are into stuff that is really,
It's physics for them have the phrase spooky action at a distance, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Fascinating to me.
absolutely.
My imagination simply cannot stretch to accommodate a concept of eternity that makes sense. What if it's not that suddenly everything that was wrong or unresolved in this life gets resolved in eternity? What if it's just now you literally have the time to work on it?
Yeah, yeah.
And
That now you're getting into multiverse. Now you're getting in reincarnation. Now you're getting into things that other practices and cultures have found ways to explain that aren't necessarily wrong, because a myth is not a lie. It's a construct that gives you a useful way to look at things that your imagination can hold on to.
Right. That's what I love how Rutledge introduced myth to us. It was myth is a way of saying this.
It's like this. Totally.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think was so interesting about C.S. Lewis. He grew up loving all these Greek myths, these Roman myths, these Norse myths.
When you read anything that he writes, this
Yeah.
is a man who read some books.
He might have read a few. And then when but he thought Christianity was just one of those. And then it just became a true myth. And so I think that's just a really interesting conversation that we could have some other time about how do you work through true and false myth, or how do you work through, because there's also a way in which myths are utilitarian and very
And truth and fact are two different things.
true.
Truth is mutable.
Yeah. Truth has
My truths about certain things are going to be very different from your truths about certain things.
Yeah,
But facts are facts.
that's true.
Yeah. And that we have, and this is why we've been friends all this time, is because we can have these conversations. And I love that, because I very seldom do I come away from a conversation with you not thinking about something new or having some new rabbit hole to go down. And just, I love that.
I am the embodiment of the poor dog from Up. It's like squirrel.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yep.
Yeah. I know. It's just so fun. Oh, had I rolled enough in time. Ready to read all the best books ever made.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Be careful what you wished for also, because Rod Serling addressed that, didn't he? In that Twilight Zone episode?
Oh, no, I don't know this. I don't know this one.
Oh, it was an episode of Burgess Meredith. He is a banker, very bookish, small man.
One where he's so excited he gets all this time to read and then he breaks his reading glasses.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's one of my friend's favorite episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's, okay, now you have all this time, But what is the time worth if you don't have the tools to use it in the way that you would like? Maybe we're being told it's no, look over here. There's something else going on. And if
Yeah.
you're not listening, we're gonna break your glasses.
Yeah.
Because then you gotta pay attention.
Yeah.
You know?
And yeah.
Oh, gosh. Geez, we could go with so many.
There's always somebody rabbit.
Oh, I know. I know.
I loved hearing how your parents encouraged both you and your brother to ask questions, to follow your
Mhm.
curiosity. I love that they tried to find a way to carry the tension of encouraging you and what you were good at and wanted to do, while also like recognizing we live in a market economy that demands a trade of some kind.
You want the best for your kid. You don't want the kid being
And, and I would love to know, did that shape how you understand? Let's shift the conversation a little bit and like thinking about role models, because there's a way in which our parents and our family, like our families of origin, are incredibly formative. And sometimes we spend our life carrying that forward, and sometimes we spend our life trying to break it apart and reform. And it's a combination of both. And
I don't remember who it was that said that our parents are our first models for God, but I think
Yeah.
that's true.
yeah, what is it in the original movie, The Crow? Mother is the name for God on the hearts and lips of children.
Hearts and lips of all children. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is just
Written by
incredible.
James O'Barr, who again never read anything. Yeah, I read a few books.
But I would just love to know, and especially as you have continued in your career, multimedia storytelling, visual arts, visual science communication, entrepreneur extraordinaire, how many careers have you had? How many times have you been pivoting and always finding the way? What does that look like? How did you come to have models for that? Who shaped your imagination for that? Aside from your parents,
Wow.
if there was anyone.
Wow. It's interesting because a lot of the artists that I loved and admired during my teen years, mostly musicians, writers, storytellers. If I go and look them up now, they're still doing some form of the same thing. The ones who made the strongest impression are still doing some form of the same thing, whereas people that they had played music with and were part of a project with have gone off and made their fortune doing other things, and sometimes had put a hand back and said, "Hey, there's this thing happening. I would love you to be a part of it." And they made the choice to say, "No, I'm good.
Mm.
I'm good where I'm at," because that just wasn't the measure of success that resonated with them. It just wasn't important to them. I would say less than having specific role models. It's the lessons that I see over time with some of these people. I was having a really hard week. And it happened to be the week that Neil Peart from Rush, their drummer and their lyricist, had died of cancer. And it was very sudden. And I think only a few people close to him knew what was going on. And I was really lamenting about, wasn't making a lot of money at the time, was having a lot of trouble meeting financial obligations. The kind of art that I see that's out there, that's got a lot of followers on social media, that seems to be making a lot of money, that's just not, it's not what I want to do. And I was listening to the Rush tribute station at the time that was on Sirius XM that they had run the entire week in honor of Neil. And it occurred to me, he was an artist. Don't think he cared about millions of followers on social media. Wouldn't have mattered to him. So what's the difference between this incredibly successful artist and this incredibly successful artist? And the thing that I kept coming back to was consistency. Rush consistently put out material that was true to who they were without the expectation of it doing anything other than being out in the world. And this is not about selling out. This is not a statement on the state of the music industry. It's just, you look at what bands like Rush, people who are doing documentaries, like Ken Burns, they're artists. They're putting art out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important stuff that is making connections, giving information. And it really helps me to remember that there isn't one model for success. There isn't one role model that's going to be, I'm going to do it like this, and within 5 years, this is where I should be. It's never linear. It never works that way.
Yeah.
I've been in the tattoo industry on and off for 30 years, and there have been years I have made a set of money, ridiculous amounts of money. And then there were years when I was lucky if I had $25 come in. But what I tried to do was be consistent with how I treated people and honoring the importance of the autonomy with my time. Because this is one thing we can't get back.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the big difference between those two types of artists. Is one of them is spending their time doing what they want to do with their time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the other, maybe not so much. Or they're spending their time doing what they want to do and sharing a little bit of that with us on social media. And showing up authentically.
Mm-hmm.
And just showing up, being unafraid and unashamed to show up authentically
Mm-hmm.
with all their messiness and their imperfections and just being who they are. And not necessarily doing it on a daily basis, because on a daily basis, they're spending their time doing what they want to do.
Right.
And if we're lucky, we'll get this little window into their lives. The other thing that I made the connections on is that when it comes to spending money, consumers will spend money. They will give money to people they want to emulate. They will give money to people who are the people that they would like to become.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you think of money as an energetic flow, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
Because this is the thing that, for most of us, gets us the food in our fridge, the roof over our head, the things that we need that are on the bottom of Maslow's pyramid. So who do we choose to give that to? It's not because they're telling us to open our wallets and send them $5. It's because they're doing something that's meaningful
Mm-hmm.
for us. And it's the call and response thing again at a concert, right? We want to be a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
This is the same thing that motivates people to go through GoFundMes for medical related expenses when they have some money that they can send to such
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
Because they want. It's the do unto others thing. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you don't necessarily want to emulate that person who is not able to cover their bills for chemo, but you want to be a part of something bigger that helps catch them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's really the way that I look at and interact with role models. Because it's not
Yeah.
necessarily, oh, what are they eating? How are they spending their time?
Sure.
It's how are they choosing to share that? Because
Yeah.
there's a couple of tattooers that have no tattoo work on their Instagram at all. They're booked out 2 to 3 years down the line
Okay.
because people just know that you can do a web search and find them, but it's nowhere on their social media.
Yeah.
They use the social media for other things. because they're realizing that the work is out there. You can find the work out there anywhere. I'm going to give you the stuff you can't get unless I'm giving it to you.
Yeah.
Again, showing up authentically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you feel like you're really making a connection.
Yeah.
Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss part 2 of our conversation. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you found something that resonated with you and that encourages you to become more hopeful, creative, and wise in your own life. Make sure to check out the links in the description below and like and subscribe if you enjoy this episode. Shalom.